And we're back. We're speaking with author and journalist Andrew Lawton. Before we went to break, we were talking about C-11 and the impact on independent media. Can you finish your thought on that?
Yeah, this dramatically expands the government's regulatory abilities that it has on television and radio to the internet, which does not have limited bandwidth and limited frequency and spectrum like TV and radio does, which warrants regulation. It's virtually unlimited bandwidth, which is why anyone and everyone can sign up to publish online on YouTube or Facebook or their own website. And the government keeps saying that it's not going to apply this to media and it's not going to apply this to user-generated content, by which they mean everyone who has an online account. But it's not convincing because so much of C-11 just expands the regulatory role of CRTC and then kicks it to CRTC to come up with those regulations. So I'm very concerned that independent media will be subjected to more regulation, more oversight, and potentially the idea of licensing just to be able to communicate with Canadians.
Yeah, very scary proposition there. Andrew, your new bestseller, The Freedom Convoy, the inside story of the 3 weeks that shook the world. Justin Trudeau called many of the convoy participants a fringe minority. Some media outlets called them insurrectionists. Tell us, what was it like being in Ottawa during that time, and what did you see?
Well, it was cold, first and foremost. I think that was like the first thing you noticed. Well, maybe you noticed the honks, and then you'd notice just like the frigid minus 18, minus 19, minus 20 air. But it was interesting because despite how freezing and unpleasant it was, and the environment of what Canadians had gone through the last 2 years at the time, there was this celebration. I mean, it was a protest. Yes, people were there because they wanted change. But at the same time, people also felt like they had something to celebrate. They were celebrating their country, their freedom, this idea they had of getting back to a life that government had taken away. And it was, I think, one of the most wildly misunderstood events by Canadian media. And that was why I set out to write about it.
So, Andrew, based on your time at the convoy, could you tell us the impact of these vaccine mandates and lockdowns on the middle class, on the small to medium-sized independent business person? Because I think there was a lot of people there representing that group of society.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the earlier part of COVID, everyone was affected by lockdowns and restrictions. If you're a customer, you couldn't go to your local coffee shop and sit down for a coffee. And if you're that coffee shop, you can't serve customers. So we were all affected by that, regardless of your view on vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, or even vaccines themselves. But the restrictions started to get more and more divisive. And then businesses had to be the enforcers of vaccination requirements, which they would be fined significantly if they didn't go along with. And I focused a lot on the effect of these restrictions on individual people. But I think the businesses themselves were put into a terrible situation. And I know firsthand of restaurateurs who, they had been shut down multiple times. The government says you can open, but only if you check people's papers. And for a lot of them, they didn't like it. They didn't want to do it, but they saw that as the only thing they could do to survive. So I actually don't hold any ill will towards businesses that did that. But we saw some absurd situations come out of it too. When Alberta had the vaccine passports in place, I was out for dinner with a number of people, and you could provide proof of vaccination or a negative test in Alberta. And we went out, and one gentleman had been vaccinated in British Columbia, and the restaurant wouldn't let him in because they looked at it and said, well, this doesn't look like the ones that we're told to look for. And this is, again, someone on a power trip. But I feel that a lot of these restrictions brought out the worst in us, and they put businesses in very untenable positions.
Absolutely. Andrew, after 3 weeks in Ottawa with the convoy, what is the one thing that you think ordinary Canadians did not know about the people participating in the convoy?
I should say I didn't have the good fortune of spending 3 weeks there. I went up at a couple of different points and tried to reconstruct a lot of what happened through interviews and analyzing video and other reporting. But even so, I have spent a lot of time speaking to these people. And I think the one important thing to note is that they're very diverse. I mean, ethnically, racially, backgrounds, yes, but their experiences and why they were protesting were very diverse. And it was not possible to put them all in any one singular box certainly not the white supremacy, neo-Nazi insurrectionist box that the government and the media tried to put them in. These were people who, many of them were fully vaccinated but didn't like mandates, people who had lost their job, people whose families had been torn apart, and they all had different reasons for being there, but they were united by what they shared as this ideal: freedom.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to discuss the Canadian economy and get Andrew's thoughts. You're watching Canadian Innovators. Don't go away.